Hey everyone, my name is Pieter Gunst, and today I'm excited to shine a spotlight on An Trotter, the Senior Director of Operations at the American multinational media conglomerate, Hearst. If you hear a weird vintage telephone noises in the background, this is a it's called Stubby. Don't be concerned, but we're going to dive right in. So Anne, you're a problem solver with a business and operations background and a really storied track record at organizations like the Rockefeller Foundation, Viacom, Harman International, and now Hearst. And it's such an amazing journey. And I really want to hear from you. What's been your path becoming the Senior Director of Operations at Hearst? What's the journey bringing you here today?
Well, first, Peter, thank you for having me today. I'm really glad to be here. And my journey started with my dad, who's a corporate securities attorney and was among the first to teach on the business of law at Emory Law School. So I grew up with lawyers, and the business of law was the dinner conversation around our table. At the time, I was on a really different career path, and I came to New York in arts administration. And then, as you mentioned, I moved into fellowships management at the Institute of International Education and the Rockefeller Foundation. And at the Rockefeller Foundation, I was named the project manager for the senior vice president's office. And that sparked an interest in going to business school. So I went to business school at night while working during the day. And when I got my degree, I thought, if I'm going to try corporate, this would be a good time to do so. And I thought back to those dinner table conversations and what my dad had said, which is that legal operations professionals were going to transform the legal industry in the 21st century.
What year are we talking here?
This is in the 1990s, he was telling me this.
That's early to the game.
Yes. So but I took that advice and I brought it back to the forefront of my mind, and I networked my way into a job at Viacom, which was my first legal operations position. And I was working for Mike Frickless, who was the GC, and Mark Morrill, who was the deputy general counsel. And they were very forward thinking. And I helped them jumpstart the legal operation at Viacom.
Amazing. Taking you from Viacom to then Hearst and being in this director of operations position, like you're managing multi-million-dollar budgets, teams, like complex operations. What are some of the key responsibilities that inform your day-to-day work? What does a typical day look like for you?
Well, first, I'd like to mention that every legal operations job I've had has had a different emphasis. So at Viacom, the emphasis was finance. At Harman, it was compliance. And at Hearst, it's been technology. But a common theme across all three of those has been process optimization. So thinking about how can you get the lawyers to work at the top of their practice and take the ministerial work off their plate. And also, how do you cultivate an operations mindset in the organization as a whole so that you're not working alone, but you're working with the team to get that done?
What does it mean to have an operations mindset?
An operations mindset means to be thinking through who the resource should be to do a particular task and how can it be done most efficiently for the desired end result for the client. And so that's what we're trying to think about, instead of what is the way I was trained to do this, how have I been doing this for years that I am most comfortable doing it, but how can I take what I know and deliver it perhaps in a new way that will lead to greater optimization and perhaps client satisfaction. So there's a lot of design thinking, user experience design, process mapping involved in the thinking process.
Right. And so in your current role, because you talk about this evolution, there was really a different focus between them. You say it's very much focused on technology, and we'll talk about Hearst Labs doing very interesting work in technology in a bit. But like the now in the day-to-day, is it really pushing large scale process improvements that are largely driven by technology?
Largely, because Hearst was a little late to the party, right? So I joined Hearst in 2017 as their first legal operations professional. And legal operations positions had now been in place for 20 years. So they had a lot of catch up to do. They had a document management system, but they were still processing their invoices manually. They had a very dated corporate secretarial system. So there was a lot of thinking in the beginning of what tool set do we need to take our agenda forward. We now have most of those tools in place. So the conversation has shifted to how do we enhance our work processes? How do we work with what we have to advance further beyond what was our initial 5-year roadmap was?
Oh,
And
fascinating.
to that end, yeah, we just finished up our strategic planning exercises, and they're in the process of reviewing that with senior management for the next 2 to 3 years.
Right. I will not ask you to give away any company secrets, but I am very interested in knowing, like, when running these kind of scale of projects, like, what are some of the key challenges, or maybe one key challenge that you encountered along the way? Like, what did you learn from it as well?
I think the key challenge at any organization is understanding the culture of your department and helping them see a vision of what the future look of the department is going to be and communicating that to them so that you're working together. And that's hard. It's particularly hard because legal operations professionals tend to be planners, whereas lawyers tend to test very high in urgency and lower in planning. So it's two very different ways of working, and you have to reconcile those. And then you have to win their hearts and minds to get them to work with you in partnership to move the agenda forward. And every place I've been, that's been the key challenge to master. And I don't know whether I can say I've come to the solution because it's always hard, but I think that you have to communicate clearly and transparently. I think it's good to draw from the well of legal operations professionals who are in the trenches with you. It's a very warm and open and supportive environment. And by seeking out advice and listening to what those who've come before you have done makes the job a lot easier to manage. You know what your strengths are, and you compensate for those for your weaknesses by surrounding yourself with people who have those strengths. It helps you to maintain perspective and to take different approaches with your clientele. And in my experience, when you do that, there's no failure except for running out of time. So as long as you have the time and you have the people to back you up, eventually you will meet with success on whatever project you take on.
Amazing. Yeah. And so you don't only have to be a business and operations wizard, but also a social influencer extraordinaire. Get all the voices in the organization aligned. It's intriguing to talk about that kind of like legal operations management for these tech projects. But I also want to quickly highlight another very exciting area that's legal technology and also broader technology related. And that's the work you've been doing with Hearst Labs, which invests in many early stage companies across a wide variety of goals, but also has legal tech as a particular focus area, or at least an area they've been involved in. What's been exciting in Hearst's perspective in technology today, and what is your team looking at in that strategic roadmap?
Thank you for asking me about that, Peter, because being a scout at Hearst is one of the favorite aspects of my job. And I'm a scout for both Hearst Lab, which focuses on women-led technology-forward startups, and also for Level Up, which has a similar focus, but for Black and Latino founders. And as I'm sure you know, in the venture capital world, less than 3% of all capital goes to companies that are led by women or people of color. So Hearst Lab and Level Up have both capitalized on the undervalued companies in the market And Hearst Labs was started by our CLO, Eve Burton, 7 years ago, to both advance the visibility of women founders, but also of women executives at Hearst, and to elevate our innovation and to deliver value to the company. We've made 60 investments over the past 7 years, and the current valuation is over $2 billion.
That's such an amazing number. And this also shows like this is about also making a business case and finding those founders that do not fit the traditional mold and that are just for that reason, like an asymmetric investment.
Exactly. And you were talking about what our legal technology investments have been. And of course, that's an area that's particularly exciting to me. And I know you're familiar with Priori Legal, founded by Basha Rubin and Mira Levitt, because you're in the competitive space with them. Luckily, there's room for multiple players, and it's an exciting place to be, with plenty of room to explore and grow the legal marketplace for corporate legal departments. But two you might not know of is we have a company called Support Pay, which is working to facilitate payments between divorced parents, particularly when there is a court order involved, and meeting the documentation requirements for the courts in maintaining those agreements. And we also have an investment in People Clerk, which is helping people who are self-representing in small claims court to organize the paperwork and present the correct substance so that they win their case. And I've been involved with all three, in both in scouting them, but also in helping them with their product development, UX design, and marketing plans. And it's a lot of fun. You know, I really enjoy that part of my job.
That's such an exciting area as well to be investing resources in. I think from the future of legal work, where we're seeing entirely new work models arise in any industry, but for that to happen in one of the most traditional of industries is very cool. And I'm grateful that there's organizations like yours that are supporting founders in that work, right? Because it certainly is a rising tide. And then to also see these investments in companies that, frankly, from a venture capital perspective, aren't obvious, right? I think it's hard to justify like consumer-facing legal tech as something that makes for like that high growth unicorn investor thesis, and to see that important area is being addressed, that we see, for example, optimization in the court processes, in the process of divorce, is tremendous. And then to hear on top of that the ROI is there, is just delightful. And I'd love a chance to continue chatting about that. And maybe we should set up a separate conversation to go a bit more in detail. But I just think it illustrates the important work you're doing, and also the very many angles you have on your environment and how you're able to apply your lessons from Hearst Lab and your work today and make that really have an impact on the department as a whole.
I was going to say that's what drives both of us, isn't it? And it goes back to what my dad said, which is that there's an opportunity to transform how law is practiced in the 21st century, leveraging these new technologies. So it's a very exciting time to be in the legal industry.
What an exciting note to end this interview with. I couldn't agree more. There's never been a better time to be in legal technology, but there's still so much potential to improve legal operations and just the system as a whole as part of that. And thank you so much for sharing a bit of your journey with us. It was really a pleasure to have you here today.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.